Dr. Lisa walked into the university faculty lounge that Tuesday morning with nothing more on her mind than getting her usual cup of coffee. She was 34 years old, had been teaching psychology for 8 years, and thought she had heard every possible theory about human relationships. Boy, was she wrong. The lounge was buzzing with conversation. Her colleagues were gathered around the small table near the window, their voices getting louder by the minute. Professor Johnson was waving his hands dramatically, clearly frustrated about something. Dr. Rodriguez was shaking her head, looking like she disagreed with whatever was being said. Even quiet Dr. Kim seemed worked up about whatever they were discussing. "What's all the fuss about?" Lisa asked, pouring herself coffee from the machine that had seen better days. "We're talking about this new research on dating apps, Professor," Johnson replied, not looking up from his phone. "The numbers are terrible. People are lonelier than ever, even though they have access to thousands of potential partners." Dr. Rodriguez jumped in. "It's not just the apps. The whole system is broken. Men don't know how to talk to women anymore. Women don't trust men. Everyone's afraid of saying the wrong thing. It's like we've forgotten how to connect as human beings." Lisa stirred her coffee and listened. She had heard this conversation before, in different forms, countless times. Her colleagues were smart people, but they seemed to be missing something important. "Don't even get me started on workplace relationships," Dr. Kim added. "Everyone's so careful about every word they say. No one wants to risk their career by showing genuine interest in someone." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes. Her colleagues painted a picture of a world where meaningful connections between men and women had become almost impossible. They talked about dating apps like they were slot machines, about social media creating unrealistic expectations, about how modern life had made everyone too busy and distracted to really get to know each other. Lisa found herself getting more and more frustrated as she listened. Not because she disagreed with their observations about modern dating being complicated, but because they seemed to be missing the bigger picture entirely. Finally, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. "You know what?" she said, setting her coffee cup down a little harder than necessary. "I think you're all completely wrong about this." The room went quiet. Her colleagues turned to look at her with surprised expressions. Lisa wasn't usually the type to disagree so directly, especially not in front of the whole group. "Wrong about what exactly?" Professor Johnson asked, raising an eyebrow. Lisa took a deep breath. She hadn't planned on getting into this discussion, but now that she'd opened her mouth, she might as well say what she really thought. "You're wrong about men being hard to connect with. You're wrong about dating being impossible. You're wrong about all of it," she said, her voice getting stronger with each word. "The truth is, men are actually fascinating when you take the time to really talk to them. Not dating app small talk, not workplace pleasantries, but real conversation." Dr. Rodriguez looked skeptical. "Come on, Lisa, have you tried dating lately?" "It's a nightmare out there. It's exactly my point," Lisa replied. "We've made it a nightmare by overthinking everything. We've created so many rules and expectations that we've forgotten how to just be curious about other people," she started, pacing a little, the way she did when she was explaining a concept to her students. "Think about it. When was the last time any of you had a real conversation with a man you didn't know well? Not a professional conversation, not small talk about the weather, but a genuine conversation where you were actually interested in learning something about him as a person." The room was still quiet, but she could tell they were listening. "I'll tell you what I think," Lisa continued. "I think men are naturally interesting, compelling people, but we've trained ourselves to approach them with so much caution and judgment that we never get to see who they really are. We're so busy evaluating whether they're good enough for us that we forget to actually get to know them." Professor Johnson leaned back in his chair. "That's quite a theory, Lisa. But don't you think you're being a bit idealistic? I mean, there are plenty of men out there who really aren't that interesting." Lisa shook her head. "I don't think that's true. I think every person has something interesting about them if you approach them with genuine curiosity instead of judgment. The problem is we've gotten so used to surface-level interactions that we've forgotten how to dig deeper."
What are
"You suggesting?" Dr. Kim asked quietly. "That we should just start having deep conversations with random men?" "Why not?" Lisa replied. "What if instead of approaching every interaction with men like it's a job interview or a potential threat, We approached it like we would any other human being we're curious about. What if we asked questions because we actually wanted to know the answers? The idea was starting to form in her mind as she spoke. She had been thinking about this for months, ever since her own dating experiences had left her feeling frustrated and disconnected. But now, saying it out loud to her colleagues, it was becoming clearer. I think men respond to genuine interest the same way everyone does, she continued. When someone is really curious about you, when they ask questions and listen to your answers, when they treat you like your thoughts and experiences matter, you become more interesting. You open up. You share the parts of yourself that make you unique. Dr. Rodriguez was still looking skeptical. You think this would work with any man? Even the ones who seem completely boring or difficult? Lisa paused for a moment, thinking. I think it would work with most people, yes. I think the boring ones might just be protecting themselves from judgment, and the difficult ones might be responding to being constantly misunderstood. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Her colleagues seemed to be actually considering what she was saying instead of just waiting for their turn to argue. You know what? Lisa said, the idea fully forming in her mind now. I could prove this. I could show you that men are actually fascinating when you approach them with genuine curiosity. Professor Johnson laughed, but not in a mean way. Exactly, would you prove something like that? Lisa felt her heart rate pick up a little. She was about to suggest something that went against everything she had been taught about proper academic research, but she was too excited about the idea to back down now. I could do an experiment, she said. Not a formal one, but a real-world test. I could spend a few months really talking to men I encounter in my daily life. Not trying to date them, not trying to evaluate them, just genuinely getting to know them as people. The room erupted in questions and comments. Some of her colleagues thought it was a terrible idea. Others seemed intrigued, but Lisa was already thinking about how she would do it, who she would talk to, what questions she would ask. I'm serious about this, she said, cutting through the chatter. I really think I could prove that men are irresistible when you approach them with genuine curiosity and openness. And I think it would change how we think about human connection entirely. Little did she know, she was about to embark on an experiment that would change not just her understanding of men, but her entire approach to human relationships. The bold declaration she had just made in the faculty lounge would lead her on a journey that would surprise everyone, including herself. 2 weeks had passed since Lisa's bold declaration in the faculty lounge, and she was starting to feel nervous. Her colleagues had been asking her about her experiment almost daily, and she realized she had no idea where to actually begin. Do you suddenly start having deep conversations with strangers? How do you approach people without seeming weird or intrusive? She decided to start small, with people she already encountered in her daily routine. The first person she thought of was the young man who worked at the coffee shop she visited every morning. She had been going there for 3 years, and their conversations had never gone beyond the usual. And thanks. Have a great day. Walking into the coffee shop that Monday morning, Lisa felt her heart beating faster than usual. The barista looked up and smiled when he saw her. He was probably in his early 20s with dark hair and paint stains on his apron. She had never really looked at him before, not really. The usual, he asked, already reaching for her regular cup size. This was her moment. Instead of nodding and checking her phone like she normally did, Lisa took a deep breath and really looked at him for the first time. You know, I come here every day, and I don't even know your name, she said, trying to sound casual despite her racing heart. He seemed surprised but pleased. I'm Alex, and you're the psychology professor, right? I've seen you grading papers. In the corner booth, yes, that's me. Lisa. She paused, noticing something she had never seen before. Are those paint stains on your apron? Do you paint? Alex's whole face lit up. Yeah, I do. I'm actually working on this huge piece right now. It's taking me forever, but I'm trying to capture the way light hits the buildings downtown during sunset. Lisa found herself genuinely curious. That sounds amazing. What kind of paint do you use? For the next 15 minutes, Alex told her. About his art, his dreams of having his own gallery someday, and how he was saving money from the coffee shop job to buy better supplies. Lisa discovered that he had been painting since he was 12, that he saw colors differently than most people, and that he had turned the tiny apartment above the coffee shop into a makeshift studio. When she finally left with her coffee, Lisa realized she was smiling. Alex wasn't just the coffee shop guy anymore. He was a person with dreams, talents, and a unique way of seeing the world. And all it had taken was one genuine question. The next day, she decided to try something different. Her neighbor had lived in the apartment next to hers for 2 years, and she had been politely avoiding him the entire time. It's not because he was rude or strange, but because she had built up this wall of awkwardness around neighbor relationships. She would smile and wave if they passed in the hallway. But that was it. His name was Robert, and he was probably in his 40s. She often heard him moving around on weekend mornings, doing something that sounded like he was building furniture or fixing things. Today, she caught him in the hallway carrying what looked like pieces of wood, building something. She asked instead of her usual quick smile and hurried walk to her door. Robert stopped and looked surprised. "Oh, hi, yeah, I'm making raised garden beds for the roof. The landlord said it was okay as long as I maintained them properly." Lisa had no idea their building even had roof access. "We can garden on the roof, want to see?" Robert asked, his eyes brightening. "I've been working on it for months." 20 minutes later, Lisa was standing on the roof of her building, looking at the most beautiful little garden she had ever seen. Robert had created this amazing space with vegetables, herbs, and flowers. He built wooden benches and even installed a small water feature that recycled rainwater. "This is incredible," Lisa said, genuinely amazed. "How did you learn to do all this?" Robert started telling her about his childhood on his grandfather's farm, how he had always loved working with his hands and watching things grow. He explained how apartment living had made him feel disconnected from nature, so he had decided to create his own little piece of the earth. "I've been composting all the organic waste from my kitchen," he said, showing her a corner of the roof. "And I've been doing the same for Mrs. Patterson in 3B. She's 92 and loves that her banana peels are helping grow tomatoes." Lisa learned that Robert was a carpenter by trade, that he had been quietly fixing things around the building for other tenants, and that he had a whole system for sharing the vegetables he grew with anyone who wanted them. Walking back to her apartment, Lisa realized she had been living next to this generous, skilled, environmentally conscious person for 2 years and had never bothered to get to know him. Her assumption that neighbor relationships were awkward had prevented her from discovering someone truly interesting. Her next test came at the gym. There was a guy who worked out around the same time she did, and she had always found him slightly intimidating. He was tall, quiet, and seemed very focused on his workout. She had never seen him talk to anyone, and she had assumed he preferred to be left alone. But after her success with Alex and Robert, Lisa decided to push her comfort zone a little further. She noticed he was reading a book between sets, which seemed unusual for a gym. "Good book?" she asked during a break, gesturing toward the paperback he was holding. He looked up, clearly surprised that someone was talking to him. "Oh yeah, it's actually a language learning guide. I'm trying to teach myself Portuguese." This opened up a conversation that lasted through both of their workouts. His name was Danny, and Lisa discovered that he was learning Portuguese because he wanted to volunteer with a charity that worked with Brazilian immigrants. He was also teaching himself Spanish and French in his spare time, not because he had to, but because he loved connecting with people from different cultures. "I work 2 jobs," he explained, "but I spend my evenings at the community center helping people with English. Learning their languages helps me understand them better." Lisa learned that Danny supported his younger brother through college, that he had grown up in foster care, and that he believed education was the key to breaking cycles of poverty. His quiet intensity at the gym wasn't about being antisocial. He was just focused and determined about everything he did. By the end of the week, Lisa had talked to her mailman, the security guard at her building, and even the bus driver on her route to work. Each conversation had revealed something unexpected and interesting about these people she had been seeing, but not really noticing for months or years. The mailman, Tom, turned out to be a former Marine who had served 3 tours overseas and now found peace in the routine of connecting with his neighborhood. The security guard, Carlos, was putting himself through night school to become a nurse. The bus driver, Mike, had memorized the names of all his regular passengers and could tell you something personal about each of them. What struck Lisa most was how much these men seemed to appreciate being asked about themselves. They weren't used to people being genuinely curious about their lives, their interests, or their dreams. When she approached them with real interest instead of polite distance, they opened up in ways that surprised both of them. She was starting to understand that her experiment wasn't just about proving that men were interesting. It was about discovering what happened when you approached people with genuine curiosity instead of assumptions. And what was happening was that ordinary interactions were becoming extraordinary connections. 3 weeks into her experiment, was already seeing the world differently. The men she encountered every day weren't just background characters in her life anymore. They were individuals with stories, dreams, and perspectives that enriched her understanding of the world around her. But she was also starting to notice something else. The experiment was changing her too. A month into her experiment, Lisa was starting to notice something she hadn't expected. It wasn't just that the men she talked to were interesting. It was that they became more interesting the more she genuinely listened to them. It was like watching flowers bloom and fast forward. She first noticed this with Jake, the quiet guy who worked at the grocery store checkout. For years, their interactions had been purely functional. He would scan her items, she would pay, and they would both move on with their day. But after her success with other conversations, Lisa decided to try something different. "You always seem to know exactly where everything is in this store," she said one evening as he rang up her groceries. "How long have you worked here?" Looked up, surprised. "About 5 years now. Started in high school and just ... stayed." There was something in his voice that made Lisa want to know more. "Do you like it here?" "It's okay," he said, but then he paused. "Actually, I've been thinking about going back to school. I want to study history." Lisa could see him light up just talking about it. "What kind of history interests you?" And then, something amazing happened. Jake started talking about World War II aviation, about the engineering marvels of early aircraft, about how pilots had to be part mathematician, part artist, and part daredevil. His eyes got brighter, his voice got stronger, and suddenly this quiet checkout clerk was transformed into a passionate storyteller. "I've been reading everything I can get my hands on," he said, his hands moving as he talked. "Did you know that some of the most important innovations in aviation came from pilots who were barely out of their teens? They were taking these machines that had been invented just decades earlier and pushing them to their absolute limits." Lisa found herself completely absorbed in his enthusiasm. She had never thought much about aviation history, but Jake's passion was infectious. He wasn't just reciting facts, he was painting pictures of young men facing impossible odds with nothing but courage and ingenuity. "That's incredible," Lisa said, meaning it. "Are you planning to apply to college?" Jake's face fell a little. "I want to, but I'm not sure I'm smart enough. I work at a grocery store. Who's going to take me seriously?" Lisa felt her heart break a little. Here was this brilliant, passionate person who had convinced himself he wasn't worthy of pursuing his dreams because of where he worked. "Jake, listening to you talk about aviation history, I can tell you're absolutely smart enough. Intelligence isn't about where you work, it's about curiosity and passion, and you have both in abundance." She left that conversation feeling energized but also sad. How many people were out there hiding their light under a bushel because they didn't think they were good enough? Her next revelation came from an unexpected source. Dr. Peterson, the maintenance supervisor at her university, was someone she had seen around campus for years, but never really talked to. He was probably in his 60s, always dressed in work clothes, always busy fixing something. One afternoon, she found him working on the heating system in her building. Instead of just walking past like she usually did, she stopped. "That looks complicated," she said, gesturing at the maze of pipes and gauges he was working on. Dr. Peterson looked up and smiled. "It is, but that's what makes it interesting. This building is from 1923, and the heating system is like a puzzle that different people have been adding pieces to for almost a century." Lisa was intrigued. "You can tell all that just from looking at the pipes?" "You can tell the story of the whole building from its mechanical systems," he said, his eyes lighting up. "See this pipe here? This was added in the 1950s when they converted the third floor from residential to office space.
This gauge?
That's from the 1970s, when they tried to modernize the system but didn't want to replace everything. For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Peterson gave Lisa a tour of the building's hidden history. He showed her where the original coal furnace had. Ben explained how the steam heating system worked and pointed out architectural details that most people never noticed. "I've been working on old buildings for 40 years, he said. Each one has its own personality, its own quirks. This building, for example, runs about 3 degrees warmer on the east side because of how the morning sun hits the brick. The architect probably never intended that, but it's been that way since day one." Lisa realized she was talking to a man who had spent decades becoming an expert in something most people took completely for granted. He understood the bones of every building on campus, could diagnose problems that stumped younger technicians, and had accumulated a lifetime of knowledge about how things worked. "That's fascinating," Lisa said. "You're like a detective, but for buildings." Dr. Peterson laughed. "I never thought of it that way, but you're right. Every broken pipe tells a story. Every electrical problem has a history. And every building has secrets that only show themselves to people who pay attention." Walking back to her office, Lisa reflected on how she had been walking past this brilliant man for years. Without realizing the depth of knowledge and experience he carried, she had seen the uniform and made assumptions about intelligence and value, when in reality, she had been surrounded by expertise she had never bothered to recognize. Her biggest surprise came from someone she had been actively avoiding. There was a man who rode the same bus as her every morning, and she had labeled him as difficult based on nothing more than his appearance, and the fact that he sometimes talked to himself. He was probably in his 50s, always carried a worn messenger bag, and had an intensity about him that made Lisa uncomfortable. But her experiment was teaching her to question her assumptions. So one morning she decided to sit near him instead of choosing a seat as far away as possible. "Good morning," she said simply. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, good morning. You're the professor, right? I've seen you reading student papers." "Yes, I teach psychology. I'm Lisa." "I'm Ben. I teach too, actually. Elementary school, 4th grade." Lisa felt ashamed of her assumptions. "How long have you been teaching?" 23 years, Ben said, his face softening. "Same school, same grade?" "I love that age. They're old enough to have real conversations, but young enough to still be excited about learning." Lisa discovered that Ben talked to himself because he was constantly thinking about his students and planning lessons. His intensity came from caring deeply about kids who often came from difficult backgrounds. His worn messenger bag was full of books, art supplies, and snacks that he bought with his own money for students who needed them. "I have this one student," Ben said, his voice full of warmth. "She came to me at the beginning of the year barely able to read. Her family moves around a lot, so she's been to 6 different schools, but she's so smart and she tries so hard. Yesterday she read an entire chapter book to me, and I almost cried right there in front of the whole class." Lisa learned that Ben stayed after school every day to tutor struggling students, that he had helped dozens of kids improve their reading over the years, and that he kept in touch with former students who were now in high school and college. "Teaching isn't just about curriculum," he said. "For some of these kids, school is the most stable thing in their lives. If I can give them 1 year where they feel safe and valued and smart, that might be enough to change their whole trajectory." The end of their conversation, Lisa understood that Ben's intensity came from carrying the weight of caring about 25 children every single day. His dedication was extraordinary, and she felt privileged to have glimpsed the heart of someone who had devoted his life to helping others. Each conversation was teaching Lisa something new. Not just about the men she was talking to, but about human nature itself. She was discovering that everyone had depths that weren't visible on the surface, that passion and intelligence came in countless forms, and that genuine curiosity could unlock stories that would otherwise remain hidden. But the most surprising discovery was still to come. 2 months into her experiment, Lisa was sitting in her apartment on a quiet Saturday evening, staring at the notebook where she had been writing down her experiences. The pages were filled with stories, insights, and observations that she hadn't expected when she started this journey. But as she read through everything, Pattern was emerging that made her question everything she thought she knew about human connection. It started with something Alex had said during their latest conversation. At the coffee shop, she had been telling him about her experiment, and he had looked at her with surprise. "You know what's funny?" he had said. "I've been working here for 3 years, and you're the first customer who ever asked me about my art. Most people just want their coffee and to get on with their day. But talking to you makes me feel like my dreams actually matter." That comment had stuck with Lisa all week. Then Robert, her neighbor, had said something similar when they were working in the rooftop garden together. "I've been doing this gardening project for months," he had told her. "My family thinks it's just a hobby, something to keep me busy. But you get it. You understand why it matters to me. That makes me want to do even more with this space." What? Then there was Danny from the gym, who had approached her the previous week with excitement. "I got accepted into that volunteer program," he had said, beaming. "The one with the Brazilian immigrants. I think our conversation about language learning gave me the confidence to actually apply. You made me feel like what I was doing was important." Lisa was starting to realize that her experiment wasn't just revealing interesting things about the men she talked to. It was actually changing them. More surprisingly, it was changing her too. She had noticed it first in small ways. Her colleagues at work had started commenting on how much more engaged she seemed in conversations. Her students had mentioned that she appeared more interested in their ideas. Even her sister had called to ask if something good was happening in her life because she sounded different on the phone, but it was deeper than just seeming more interested. Lisa was discovering that the approach she had been using with her experiment, genuine curiosity, open-ended questions, and really listening to answers, was transforming all of her relationships. The breakthrough came when she was having dinner with her friend Rachel, someone she had known for 5 years. They were talking about Rachel's job at the marketing firm. And instead of just nodding along like she usually did, Lisa found herself asking follow-up questions. "What do you like most about working with small businesses?" Lisa asked. Rachel paused, looking surprised. No one's ever asked me that before. I guess I like that I can actually make a difference. When I help a small restaurant get more customers, I can see the immediate impact. The owner's face lights up when they tell me sales are up." Conversation continued for 2 hours, and Lisa learned things about Rachel that she had never known despite years of friendship. Rachel had started her own blog about sustainable living, was considering going back to school for environmental studies, and had been feeling stuck in her career, but hadn't known how to talk about it. "This is the best conversation we've had in years," Rachel said as they were leaving the restaurant. "I feel like you really heard me tonight." Driving home, Lisa realized that her experiment had taught her something crucial about human connection. It wasn't that men were specifically irresistible, it was that all people became more interesting, more attractive, more compelling, when they felt genuinely seen and heard. She started thinking about all the conversations she had had over the past 2 months. Jake talking about aviation history with such passion that she could picture the planes he was describing. Dr. Peterson explaining the personality of buildings with the enthusiasm of someone sharing a fascinating secret. Ben's eyes lighting up when he talked about his students' progress. What made these conversations magical wasn't something special about these men. It was the fact that Lisa had approached each conversation with authentic curiosity about them as individuals. She had asked questions because she genuinely wanted to know the answers. She had listened because she was truly interested in their responses. And in return, they had shared parts of themselves that they rarely got to express. They had talked about their dreams, their passions, their knowledge, and their experiences. With someone who valued what they had to say, Lisa realized that most people, most of the time, move through their days without anyone being genuinely curious about them. They interacted with others in functional ways, ordering coffee, checking out groceries, exchanging pleasantries, but rarely experienced the joy of having someone be truly interested in their thoughts and experiences. Her experiment had created space for that kind of connection, and the results had been extraordinary. Not because the men she talked to were unusually interesting, but because everyone became more interesting when they felt valued and heard. But there was another layer to this revelation that took Lisa longer to understand. She had been so focused on proving that men were interesting that she had missed the most important discovery of all. It happened during a conversation with Professor Johnson, her colleague, who had been most skeptical about her experiment. He had stopped by her office to ask about her progress. "So how's your experiment going?" he asked. "Still think all men are irresistible?" Lisa laughed. "You know what? I think I was asking the wrong question from the beginning." "What do you mean?" "I was trying to prove that men are interesting, but what I actually discovered is that people are interesting when you approach them with genuine curiosity. The magic wasn't in them. It was in the approach." She explained how her conversations had worked, how asking real questions and listening to answers had transformed ordinary interactions into meaningful connections. "But here's the thing," Lisa continued. "The approach only worked because I was genuinely curious. I couldn't fake it. I had to actually care about the answers I was getting." Professor Johnson looked thoughtful. "So what changed? Why were you suddenly able to be genuinely curious about people you had been ignoring for years?" Lisa paused, considering the question. "I think it was because I stopped trying to evaluate them and started trying to understand them. Instead of judging whether they were worth my time, I became interested in who they were as people." This was the revelation that had been building throughout her experiment. She had started with the hypothesis that men were naturally interesting, but what she had actually discovered was that authentic curiosity was naturally transformative. When she approached people with genuine interest in their experiences, thoughts, and feelings, they responded by sharing more of themselves. And when people shared more of themselves, they became more interesting, more engaging, more compelling. But the transformation wasn't just one way. By practicing genuine curiosity, Lisa had become more interesting herself. She was more engaged with the world around her, more aware of the complexity and richness of human experience, and more connected to the people in her life. She had set out to prove that men were irresistible. But she had ended up discovering something much more powerful, that genuine human connection was irresistible, and that anyone could create it by approaching others with authentic curiosity and openness. The experiment had changed her entire understanding of what it meant to connect with other people. She was just beginning to understand how profound that change really was. 3 months after her bold declaration in the faculty lounge, Lisa knew she had to share what she had learned. But she wasn't sure how to explain something that had changed her entire understanding of human connection. How do you tell people that everything they think they know about relationships might be wrong? The answer came to her during a conversation with Dr. Rodriguez, who had been following her experiment with growing interest. "You should give a talk," Dr. Rodriguez suggested. "Not just to our department, but to the whole university. Maybe even open it to the public. What you've discovered could help a lot of people." Lisa felt nervous about the idea. Speaking to a room full of strangers about her personal experiment felt vulnerable and scary, but she also felt excited. She had learned something important, and keeping it to herself seemed selfish. "I don't know," Lisa said. "What would I even call it? How I proved men are interesting." "Ah, sounds terrible." Dr. Rodriguez laughed. "From what you've told me, that's not really what you proved anyway. You proved something much bigger than that." Lisa spent the next week thinking about what she had actually discovered. She read through her notebook again, remembering all the conversations, all the moments of connection, all the times when someone had lit up because they felt truly heard. Finally, she decided to do it. She would give a public talk about her experiment, but she would focus on what she had really learned about human connection and curiosity. The lecture hall was packed on the evening of her talk. Lisa had expected maybe 50 people, but over 200 had shown up. Students, faculty, and community members filled every seat. Some people were even standing in the back. Lisa took a deep breath and walked to the podium. She had decided not to use PowerPoint slides or academic jargon. She wanted to tell the story the way it had happened, with all the surprises and revelations that had changed her life. 3 months ago, I made a bold claim to my colleagues, she began. I said that men were naturally interesting and compelling and that I could prove it. I was so confident about this that I decided to conduct an experiment to show everyone. I was right, she paused, looking out at the audience. Well, I was wrong, but I was also more right than I ever imagined. Lisa started with the story of Alex, the coffee shop barista, who had turned out to be a passionate artist. She described how one simple question about paint stains had led to a 15-minute conversation that completely changed how she saw him. But here's the thing, she said. Alex didn't become interesting because he was a man. He became interesting because I approached him with genuine curiosity about who he was as a person. She told the story of Robert and his rooftop garden, of Dr. Peterson and his building expertise, of Ben and his dedication to his students. With each story, she could see people in the audience nodding, recognizing themselves in these moments of connection. Every single conversation taught me something new, Lisa continued. Not just about the person I was talking to, but about the power of genuine curiosity. When you approach someone with authentic interest in their experiences and ideas, something magical happens. They don't just share information, they share themselves. She talked about how the experiment had changed her own relationships, how practicing genuine curiosity had made her a better friend, colleague, and person. She described the ripple effects she had seen as people responded to being truly heard and valued. I realized that most of us move through our days surrounded by fascinating people. But we never discover how fascinating they are because we're not really paying attention. We're too busy, too distracted, too focused on our own concerns to be genuinely curious about others. An older woman in the front row raised her hand. But how do you know when someone wants to have that kind of conversation? How do you know you're not bothering them? Lisa smiled. That's a great question. I was worried about that too at first. But I discovered that most people are hungry for genuine connection. They want someone to be interested in them. The key is to start small and follow their lead. If someone lights up when you ask a question, keep asking. If they seem uncomfortable, respect that and back off. A young man in the back called out, "What if you're not naturally curious about people? What if you're shy or introverted?" "I'm naturally introverted," Lisa replied. "This didn't come easily to me at first. Curiosity is a skill you can develop. Start with one genuine question. Listen to the answer. Ask a follow-up question based on what they said. It gets easier with practice." For the next hour, Lisa fielded questions and shared more stories from her experiment. She talked about how to overcome assumptions, how to listen effectively, and how to create space for authentic connection in everyday interactions. But the most powerful moment came when she shared her final revelation. "I set out to prove that men are irresistible," she said, "but what I actually proved is that human connection is irresistible. When we approach others with genuine curiosity and openness, we create the conditions for meaningful relationships to flourish." She paused, looking out at the audience. The men I talked to weren't special because they were men. They were special because they were human beings with rich inner lives, and I gave them the opportunity to share that richness with someone who cared. The applause was thunderous, but Lisa was most moved by what happened afterward. Person after person approached her to share their own stories of connection and disconnection. A retired teacher talked about how she had been feeling invisible since retirement. A college student shared how lonely he felt despite being surrounded by people. A middle-aged businessman admitted that he couldn't remember the last time someone had asked him about his dreams. "Your talk made me realize that I've been waiting for other people to be curious about me," one woman said. "Oh, but I could be the one who starts those conversations." Over. The following weeks, Lisa received hundreds of emails from people who had attended the talk or heard about it from friends. They shared stories of conversations they had started, connections they had made, and relationships they had deepened by applying the principles Lisa had discovered. Alex, the coffee shop barista, wrote to tell her that he had finally applied to art school and had been accepted. "Our conversation that day was the first time an adult had taken my art seriously," he wrote. "It gave me the confidence to believe in myself." Robert, her neighbor, had organized a building-wide garden club and was teaching other tenants how to grow their own food. Ben, the elementary school teacher, had started a program to pair struggling students with volunteer reading mentors. But the most meaningful response came from her colleagues. Professor Johnson, who had been most skeptical about her experiment, approached her a month after the talk. Tried your approach with my teenage son, he said.
Dad?
Instead of lecturing him about his grades, I asked him about his music. For 3 hours. It was the best conversation we've had in years. Lisa realized that her experiment had become something much bigger than proving a point about men. It had become a demonstration of how genuine curiosity and authentic connection could transform relationships, communities, and lives. 6 months later, Lisa published a book about her experiment. But she always said that the real proof of her discovery wasn't in the book sales or the speaking engagements. It was in the countless small moments of connection that happened every day when people chose to approach each other with genuine curiosity. Instead of judgment, her bold declaration had been proven, but not in the way she had expected. Discovered that the irresistible quality she'd been looking for wasn't specific to men or women. It was the fundamental human need to be seen, heard, and valued for who we really are. And anyone could create that kind of connection simply by being genuinely curious about the people around them.